If I asked you right now to name 3 fruits you feel completely confident eating as a diabetic, could you do it? Most of my patients can't, not because the science is unclear, because the advice they've received has been so contradictory that their confidence has simply eroded. Today, I want to give that back. I want to start by acknowledging something that doesn't get said enough. Managing diabetes through diet is genuinely confusing. Not because the science doesn't exist, it does, but because what actually reaches most patients is a fragmented, often contradictory collection of half-truths. I've had patients tell me they were told by one provider that fruit was essentially sugar and should be treated like candy. Then they read a wellness article saying natural fruit sugar is harmless in any amount. Then a headline told them tropical fruits were dangerous, with no further explanation. What do you do with that? Most reasonable people do the only sensible thing. They pick the most conservative interpretation. They stop eating mangoes. They feel guilty about an apple. They look at a bowl of strawberries and genuinely cannot tell whether it's helping or harming them. That is not an informed position. It's a fear position. And it's quietly removing access to foods that, when chosen correctly, can support blood sugar stability, protect blood vessel health, and genuinely improve daily quality of life. I want to fix that today, not with reassurance, with numbers. I've spent the last 2 decades working with patients navigating the real daily experience of managing diabetes after 60. Not the textbook version, the actual version, with real meals, real cravings, and real frustration. In this video, I want to walk you through what I call the 2-number rule, the only framework you need to evaluate any fruit's effect on your blood sugar. Once you understand it, the guesswork disappears. You'll be able to look at any piece of fruit and know clearly what it's going to do inside your body. Before we go further, drop a comment and tell me, what's the one fruit you stopped eating because you weren't sure if it was safe? I'm genuinely curious, and I'll try to address specific ones in the comments. If this is your first time here, welcome. This channel exists to translate health research into something genuinely useful for life after 60. Subscribe if this kind of conversation helps you. One important note before we start, fruit's effect on blood sugar varies between individuals depending on medication, activity, and what you eat alongside it. Everything I share today is meant to support a conversation with your doctor, not replace one. Please don't make significant dietary changes without looping in your care team. Now, the 2 numbers that change everything. Most people managing diabetes have heard of the glycemic index. It's a measurement, a scale from 1 to 100, of how quickly the sugar in a food enters your bloodstream. Above 70, that sugar arrives like a sudden wave breaking on shore. Your glucose spikes sharply, your pancreas scrambles to respond, and you get exactly the kind of instability that, over time, accelerates the vascular damage associated with diabetes. Below 55, the sugar arrives more like a tide coming in, gradual, predictable. Your pancreas has time to respond proportionately. Blood glucose rises and falls in a controlled arc. That much, most people know. But here is where understanding usually stops, and where the confusion begins. The glycemic index only tells you one thing: how fast. It tells you nothing about how much. Think of it this way: a road has a speed limit. That's the glycemic index. It tells you how fast vehicles are moving. But if you want to understand the actual traffic on that road, speed alone is incomplete. 2 cars moving quickly is very different from 200 cars moving at the same speed. The volume matters just as much as the velocity. The measurement that captures the total amount of sugar that actually lands in your bloodstream from a realistic serving of food is called the glycemic load. Glycemic load takes the GI and adjusts it for the real amount of sugar in a standard portion. It gives you the complete picture. For blood sugar management, the numbers are straightforward. GL under 10, safe territory. GL above 20, a genuine concern worth noting. Here's why this single distinction changes the entire conversation about fruit. Watermelon has a glycemic index above 72. If you stop there, it sounds alarming. High GI, risky, avoid. But watermelon is 92% water. A standard 120-gram portion contains almost no actual sugar density. Its glycemic load at that portion? Just 4, well within safe range. Meanwhile, a small handful of dried apricots carries a GI of around 30. Sounds excellent, low GI. But the process of drying removes all the water and concentrates what remains. The glycemic load of that same small handful regularly exceeds 30, more than 3 times the danger threshold. The GI told one story, the GL told the truth. Always use both numbers. That is the 2-number rule. Dorothy was 68 when she came to my practice, a retired teacher, methodical and research-oriented, who had been managing type 2 diabetes for 6 years with genuine discipline. She had eliminated nearly all fruit from her diet. Not reluctantly, deliberately. She had read that fruit contained sugar, that sugar raised blood glucose, and that the logical conclusion was to limit her exposure. Her diet was controlled, but her A1C had plateaued at 7.9 for nearly 2 years despite consistent effort. And she was, in her own words, exhausted by how restrictive eating had become. When I reviewed her food diary, one thing stood out immediately: almost no fiber-rich plant foods, no berries, no citrus, no stone fruits, foods she had been avoiding for 2 years because nobody had ever given her a framework for evaluating them. We introduced 5 specific fruits in controlled portions, guided entirely by the 2-number rule, and tracked her readings daily. Within 3 weeks, her post-meal spikes had actually decreased slightly compared to her baseline. The fiber in the new foods was slowing the absorption of everything she ate alongside them. Within 3 months, her A1C had moved from 7.9 to 7.4. Dorothy's response: "I spent 2 years afraid of strawberries. I genuinely didn't know." These 10 fruits have consistently low glycemic index and glycemic load, all measured at a standard 120-gram portion, which is roughly 4 ounces. Plum's a gentle, well-tolerated option, rich in vitamin C and compounds that research associates with liver function support. Relevant because the liver plays a direct role in regulating overnight blood glucose. Eat them fresh, slightly firm, rather than fully soft. Pears. Most of the beneficial fiber in a pear sits in and just beneath the skin. Don't peel it. That fiber acts as a physical brake on sugar absorption, slowing the rate at which glucose reaches your bloodstream. Slightly underripe pears deliver the most controlled effect. Apples. One of the most well-studied fruits for metabolic health. The soluble fiber, pectin, doesn't just slow sugar absorption. It also helps reduce LDL cholesterol, which matters significantly. Approximately 2/3 of people with type 2 diabetes also develop high blood pressure over time. Skin on, fresh, whole. Passion fruit. One of the lowest glycemic fruits available. Worth noting, research suggests the natural compounds in passion fruit have a mild effect on sleep quality, and poor sleep directly worsens insulin resistance and can raise fasting glucose on its own. A fruit that supports both blood sugar and sleep is genuinely valuable for this population. Whole oranges. Safe, nutritious, and frequently misunderstood. A whole orange is an excellent choice. Orange juice is not. The fiber that makes the whole fruit safe is stripped during juicing, and the glycemic load of a standard glass of orange juice climbs above 20. Same fruit. Completely different metabolic behavior because of what's been removed. Kiwi. One of the most nutrient-dense options on this list. High in both vitamin C and vitamin E, antioxidants that play a protective role in the arterial damage that accumulates with long-term diabetes. Some studies also associate regular kiwi consumption with mild reductions in blood pressure. GL of 9 sits right at the upper boundary of safe, 1 per serving, not 2. Strawberries among the lowest glycemic load of any fruit you'll find. The anthocyanins in strawberries, the pigment molecules behind their color, are among the best-studied compounds for vascular protection. They support the structural integrity of blood vessel walls and measurably reduce cardiovascular inflammatory markers. For diabetics managing cardiovascular risk alongside blood sugar, which is most diabetics over 60, strawberries deserve to be a regular part of the diet. Guava, the lowest glycemic index on this entire list. For context, white bread sits at a GI of around 75. Guava sits at 23. Eaten whole with seeds and skin, it delivers an exceptionally slow, stable sugar release. If fresh guava is accessible to you, it is one of the most blood sugar-friendly fruits available anywhere. Peach is sweet enough to genuinely satisfy a craving for something indulgent, with a glycemic load that stays comfortably within safe range. One important note: fresh or frozen peaches only. Canned peaches are frequently stored in syrup that pushes the GL significantly higher. Check the label, or avoid canned entirely. Fresh cherries rich in the same anthocyanins found in strawberries, but in higher concentration. Research on cherries has specifically shown reductions in the inflammatory markers associated with both diabetes and cardiovascular disease. Portion awareness matters here. About 15 fresh cherries, not a full bowl. And always fresh or frozen, maraschino cherries are an entirely different product with an entirely different metabolic profile. These 5 fruits are not forbidden, but they require genuine understanding because their GI, GL, or typical portion behavior creates real risk without awareness. These 5 fruits are not forbidden, but they require genuine understanding because their GI, GL, or typical portion behavior creates real risk without awareness. Papaya right at the boundary of safe. The enzyme papain in papaya does have legitimate digestive benefits, but a GL of 10 leaves almost no margin for a larger portion or a riper fruit. If you eat papaya, keep the serving small and choose fruit that's slightly underripe. Pineapple. The enzyme bromelain has some research-backed anti-inflammatory properties, but a GL of 14 requires genuine portion discipline. Half a cup maximum, not a bowl, not a large slice. And fresh or frozen only. Canned pineapple in juice or syrup pushes the GL higher still. Mango. One of the most beloved fruits and one of the most consistently underestimated. The issue isn't just the GL of 14, it's portion creep. Most people eat considerably more than a 120-gram serving of mango without realizing it. A full mango can push the GL to 20 or beyond. If you eat mango, half a cup, measured, and ideally not on a day when other meals have already been carbohydrate heavy. Bananas. Genuine nutritional value. Potassium, B vitamins, accessible energy for movement. The complication is a GL of 16, combined with the ripeness factor. An overripe banana carries a meaningfully higher GL than a slightly green one, because the resistant starch that slows sugar absorption in underripe fruit converts to fast-acting sugar as the banana matures. If you eat bananas, yellow with a slight green tinge, not heavily spotted. Grapes. Grapes contain resveratrol, a polyphenol with genuine antioxidant research behind it. The problem is portion. Because grapes are small, bite-sized, and easy to eat continuously, most people dramatically underestimate their intake. 20 to 25 grapes, which passes quickly, delivers a sugar load comparable to a small candy bar. If you eat grapes, count them. 10 to 12, not a bunch. 2 specific situations deserve direct attention because they consistently catch people off guard: dried fruit, raisins, dried apricots, dried mango, dates. The drying process removes all the water and concentrates everything that remains. A small handful of fresh grapes has a GL of around 6. The same weight as raisins has a GL that regularly exceeds 30. More than 3 times the danger threshold from something that looks small, healthy, and harmless in a trail mix or granola bowl. If you eat dried fruit, it is an occasional treat, measured in tablespoons, not handfuls, not a daily snack. Ripeness. This one is underappreciated. As fruit matures, its resistant starches convert progressively to fast-acting sugars. Resistant starch, which is abundant in underripe fruit, is absorbed slowly and feeds beneficial gut bacteria. By the time a fruit is fully overripe, much of that structural benefit has converted to the very form of sugar that causes problems. The same banana, 2 days apart on your counter, can behave quite differently inside your body. Eat fruit at moderate ripeness, not maximum sweetness. Frank is 71, a retired firefighter, disciplined and consistent, who walked 40 minutes every morning without exception. When I met him, he hadn't eaten fruit in 3 years. His previous doctor had suggested eliminating it. Frank follows instructions. He had. His blood sugar was reasonably controlled, fasting readings typically around 138, but he was frustrated. He exercised consistently. He watched what he ate. He wanted better numbers and couldn't understand why they weren't moving. When I reviewed his diet, one thing stood out clearly: almost no dietary fiber. Strong on protein and vegetables, but the fiber-rich, polyphenol-rich foods that support vascular health, inflammation management, and insulin sensitivity were largely absent. We introduced strawberries alongside his morning eggs and fresh cherries as an afternoon option, both well within the 2-number rule. Nothing else changed. Within 6 weeks, Frank's average fasting glucose had shifted from 138 to 124, a 14-point improvement from 2 servings of fruit per day. His response: "I was disciplined about removing everything I thought was working against me. I didn't realize I was also removing things that were working for me." Almost every patient I've worked with has asked me about watermelon at some point. It comes up constantly because the numbers seem to contradict themselves, and it illustrates the 2-number rule better than almost any other example. Watermelon's glycemic index sits above 72. By any GI-based guideline, that looks alarming. But watermelon is 92% water. A standard 120-gram portion, roughly 1 cup of cubed watermelon, contains very little actual sugar. Its glycemic load at that portion is just 4, well within safe territory. Watermelon also contains a compound called L-citrulline, which supports blood vessel relaxation and has been associated with healthy blood pressure, particularly relevant given the cardiovascular overlap in type 2 diabetes. The fruit is not dangerous. The portion size is what determines the outcome. 1 cup, fine. 3 cups, you've created a real problem. Watermelon is a GI-only cautionary tale. The GL tells a different story. Here's the practical question. Where do you actually start with this? Large dietary overhauls rarely hold. They're overwhelming. They require constant willpower. And when they slip, which they do, they leave people feeling worse than before. What holds is smaller shifts, 1 at a time. Start with breakfast. A consistent, blood sugar-friendly breakfast that incorporates fruit correctly can stabilize your morning glucose, which sets the metabolic tone for the rest of the day. A practical breakfast template: a protein base, eggs, plain Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, which slows the absorption of everything eaten alongside it, 1 serving of a low GL fruit, strawberries, a sliced apple, fresh cherries, or half a pear, no juice, always whole fruit. Eaten within the first hour of waking. Give this single change 2 weeks before evaluating. Track your post-breakfast readings. The data will show you whether it's working. Once breakfast is stable, apply the same logic to your other meals, 1 at a time. The goal here isn't perfection, it's understanding. When you can look at any piece of fruit, recall its 2 numbers, and make a clear decision, the fear dissolves. And that's when managing this condition starts feeling like something you're doing rather than something that's happening to you. Helen is 74. She came to me with an A1C of 8.1, a long history of yo-yo dieting, and deep frustration with 10 years of contradictory advice. She'd tried low carb. She'd tried eliminating fruit. She'd tried adding it back. Nothing had held long enough to matter. What she had never had was a framework, a consistent set of principles she could apply to any food in any situation. We worked through the 2-number rule. She printed the fruit reference list and put it on her fridge. We started with 1 change: fruit at breakfast alongside a protein. Over 3 months, she gradually applied the same logic to the rest of her meals. At her 6-month follow-up, her A1C was 7.2, down from 8.1. She still eats mango, half a cup measured with protein alongside it. She still eats bananas, slightly green 1 at a time. She still eats grapes, 12, counted. And she eats strawberries with her eggs every single morning. Her words: "This is the first time in 10 years that I felt like I understand what I'm doing, instead of just following rules I don't fully believe in." I want to end with something I mean genuinely. The fear of fruit that so many diabetics over 60 are living with is not protecting them. In many cases, it is actively removing access to some of the most potent, cardiovascular protective, inflammation-reducing, blood sugar-supporting foods available. Foods that work with the diabetic body when chosen correctly. The answer was never to eliminate. The answer was to understand. 2 numbers. That is the entire framework. GL under 10, and you can eat from that green list without guilt, without guesswork, and without the kind of relentless dietary vigilance that makes managing this condition feel unsustainable over a lifetime. Print the list, put it on the fridge, pick one fruit from the green column, and add it to your breakfast this week. Then come back and tell me what happened to your numbers. I read every comment, and I genuinely want to know. If this video helped you, please share it with someone managing diabetes who has been avoiding fruit because nobody gave them the right framework. You might be giving them back something they've missed for years. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.